All right, what is up, guys? We are hanging out with Paul Jackman today, who has a normal-sized head. I feel like in all of the Instagram pictures I see of you, your head is blown up. But excited to be chatting with you, talk about all things X-Carve Pro, and Easel, and the projects you've been working on. But thanks for jumping on. This is kind of I think a first time. We haven't done much of these in the past, so thanks for jumping in with us.
Yeah, great to be here. I've been really enjoying the new X-Carve. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into a lot of the details of those. But for those of you that are tuning in, either now live or watching, if you guys have questions, either for Paul about his projects, there's links in the description of the YouTube stream, or you can check out his channel. And then also, if you got questions about the X-Carve Pro specifically, which is a brand new machine we got coming out next year. And Paul, you're like one of I think 4 people in the entire world that have them, other than us. So we're going to get some of his feedback on it, how it's been for him. And then if you guys don't know, so I'm pretty new with the team. My name is Brandon. I get to do a lot of fun stuff like this, chat with Paul, as well as engage with you guys on the community side of things. But man, I would love to kind of set the stage a little bit, and just your kind of relationship with Inventables. Like, when did you first get your first X-Carve? Actually, even before that, like, when did you even first learn about CNC stuff? What was that like for you?
I touched on it a bit in high school. I went to a vocational high school, and I think it was my junior or senior year. They got in like a big industrial 4x8 machine with tool changer, vacuum table, all the bells and whistles. And it was a little late for me to really learn a lot of it, but I got to play with it a bit, make some signs and stuff. But that was the introduction to it. And then, I graduated from there, and eventually set up my own wood shop. And I think 4 years ago, I got my first X-Carve. I inherited it from Ben Ueda. I think it was
I didn't know you had Ben's older
machine.
That's funny. Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, so I inherited that, so I didn't have to assemble it. That's like my claim to fame. Is that, I didn't have to assemble my own X-Carve because Ben did it for me.
That's funny. Was that the one that he did the stairs project with, or was that a different unit?
I'm not sure, honestly. I feel like I should know that.
No, I feel like I should know that. I should go back and look and see. But if you guys don't know Ben, so Homemade Modern, he does crazy stuff. He's built out tons of wild stuff. So, so after you got that first machine, how did it kind of work into just your normal like woodworking flow? Like just using the CNC over the years, how's that kind of work for you?
Yeah, I mostly use it as like a supplement to my other projects to add logos onto things or just little intricate carvings. It wasn't really something at first that I used for a complete project. It was kind of just adding customization, I guess, to other projects I was working on.
Yeah. And you've done some pretty crazy stuff over the years. I feel like one of the first ones that I saw you were doing was like a huge map of DC, or that area that you'd use the car for. But like how many projects have you done, at least for Inventables, on that side of things?
Yeah, I was trying to look that up now. I was anticipating the question.
I should really have all this looked up as well. But go to Paul's channel. He has tons of crazy stuff. But or maybe not even specifics. Do you have like a memorable project, like one of your favorites that you've worked on?
That map one definitely sticks out. I want to say I've probably done, I don't know, 10 dedicated videos maybe. And that map of DC, I'm always trying to push the X-Carve to see kind of how far it can go. And that it was a basically 4 foot by 4 foot diamond, because DC is roughly the shape of a diamond except for the part that's cut out by Virginia. And the X-Carve can't do 4 by 4. It's like 29 inches roughly. So what I did is I divided it up in quadrants, because DC is actually divided into quadrants. So that kind of worked out. And then I was able to carve the entire piece in 4 sections and then piece it together. But that was all carved with a V-bit. Every single road and waterway, river, pond, anything like that was all carved in, and then I filled it with epoxy. But some of those, I think the northwest quadrant was the biggest one. That took 8 hours to carve because it was so much detail. And that was with the speed cranked up quite a bit, but it handled it well. I just kind of like set it to go and carve and did something else while I kind of kept an eye on it in the background.
And that's the original X-Carve, right?
Yep, that is.
Yeah. How do you remember how fast you were going with that?
I'm not sure, but with the V-bit, you can speed it up pretty good because you don't take away a ton of material.
Right.
So the recommendations are generally fairly conservative, and it was in pine, so I just kind of like slowly dialed it up until it started whining. and then
Yes,
step it
that's
back a little bit.
yeah. With buy, even before I started working with Inventables, my machine, I do the same thing. It's like let me dial it all the way up until I feel like I'm about to break something, and then
Right.
bring it back just a little bit. So
Exactly. And it's really nice in Easel. After you get it running, you can adjust it like plus or minus 100%.
yeah, that so that map project specifically, did you were you getting like map data? Like how were you generating all that stuff to do the graphics?
Yeah, it was really tricky. That was the hardest part, was finding the data and then getting it in a format that was CNCable.
Hmm.
I made a dedicated video actually about that process, to pull the digital stuff like offline. I think I used, it was like Snazzy Maps or something like that. There was some mapping website where you could pull off like a PDF version of the map, and then I opened that up in Illustrator and then kind of cleaned everything up, got, kept the roads and everything that I wanted, and then I was able to export that as an SVG into Easel, and then cut from there.
That's cool. Yeah, I think I remember watching that tutorial because I was wanting to do kind of something similar here in Athens, and I feel like I saw it was like
Yeah,
you had a template in Snazzy Maps that was like named after you, if I remember
right.
right. And I think I used your exact template to do some of my projects. I was like, this is he's
Yeah,
done all the work.
that's it. I had to
Um,
like make some dedicated thing. Like, it was funny. I searched around a lot, and there was a lot of tutorials for lasers, but nothing
yeah,
for the CNC that I could find.
yeah. So that was all VBit, you said, right? And then did you like pocket out the water and everything?
Yeah, so it was a two-stage carve. Like, the river was the only part that was like really wide. All the roads were just with a V-bit, but the Potomac River, I cut that out with like I think an eighth inch or a quarter inch straight bit, and then everything else was with a V-bit.
That's cool. And yeah, so as people are jumping in, I'm watching the chat a little bit. I think Zach is actually in it. So Zach, the CEO, he's answering questions. You guys have it. So if you guys have questions specifically about Prowl's projects, make sure and drop them in. And if you just do at Inventables, I'll kind of help me filter it, and we'll answer them towards the end. And if you guys have questions about XCarve, XCarve Pro, make sure and get them in there. And if we can't get to you, then we can also send you guys some links. But I think Zach's in there answering a few. But okay, so going a little bit to the XCarve Pro side of things, when did you first hear there was a new unit coming out?
So I it was last winter, I think, or maybe it was 2 years ago. Man, time flies. I can't remember. It was probably a year ago, because I went
Okay.
and when Mo was still with you guys, I went and toured the facility there in Chicago, because I was there for another event, and I think it was 2 years ago, because there was like a very very early prototype of the X-Carve Pro. I didn't know what it was at that point, but they're like, this is just something new that we're working on. Eventually, might be a thing. We'll see. And
Yeah.
it was like very cryptic. That's I didn't really know much about it at that point, but that was the first time that I'd seen a kind of an X-Carve Pro at that point.
That's cool. And then it was earlier this year we reached out to ask if you wanted to be one of the, I think you, Johnny Builds, Chris Salamone, Ben's getting one, Ben Ueda, some folks
Mhm.
over at Tested, and there's somebody else I'm missing, are also getting them. But when did you first hear that you were going to get kind of one of the first, I guess, influencer, quote unquote, units?
I guess that was early this year, I want to
Okay.
say. It's something, because with the pandemic and stuff, a lot of the dates have shifted around
Right.
quite a
It's
bit.
been
And then I
crazy.
moved this summer too, and the timing worked out. Like, as soon as I got here, the CNC showed up for my new shop. But I think it was like first thing 2020.
That's cool. So we send the unit out. I know we announced it a couple months back, and then you were working alongside making some projects. But when you first got it in, kind of what was that process like? Even though I know you already had a pre-assembled XCarve, so I think maybe you're one of the few XCarve customers to never have like done the nuts and bolts on putting a kit together.
Right.
But the Pro comes as a kit. But what was that kind of like? Your kind of first impressions getting it in your shop?
Yeah, I don't have a direct comparison because I didn't do it myself, but I watched a lot of videos of other people doing it. And
Yeah,
like my buddy Pat up in Canada, he put one together, and I heard a lot about that process, and it's very different. The XCarve Pro comes in a crate, and it's like, I don't know, 6, 8 pieces. It's not much. The whole gantry is all assembled, and then you have the two side rails, and then a couple of cross supports. And I got it together in a couple hours,
that's cool.
maybe, and that's because I was taking my time. but it's very very simple thing to put together. I was surprised, and I didn't have to like tram it or do anything fancy. Like it was already very square and ready to go out of the box.
Yeah, and it was you have the 4x4 unit, right?
Hmm.
Sweet. Yeah, so there, if you guys didn't know, there's basically a half version of it, a 4x2, and then that 4x4. So when you first started looking at it, as far as on the project, like the build side of things, like where did the like the articulated hand idea, where did that come from?
I don't know. I was just trying to think of like some funny idea that I could incorporate with current events, I guess. The holidays, and then all the stuff that we're going through right now. And I just thought it was a funny idea. You guys had asked for something. It was funny. I came up with some ideas that were like very practical, which is not like me for the most part. Just because of the new house, I had some like furniture project and storage project ideas at hand, and they're like, no, come up with something wacky. It's like, all right, I can do that. So that's just kind of where it came from. I don't know.
Yeah, the having you do a standard project, I feel like would just feel weird. Like not
Right.
like when I first saw that that's what you were doing, I'm like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. He's making something giant or something crazy. The what I thought was crazy about it was I guess when I first saw like the brief or just like your pitch, I didn't realize it was gonna actually like work. Like you ran like how did that work? Like the mechanism for folks that maybe not have seen it.
Yeah, so I basically cut out each finger on the X-Carve Pro in pieces and then sandwiched it together in 3 layers. And then within those 3 layers in the center, there were pockets cut out at the top for a bungee cord and at the bottom for a piece of paracord. And the bungee cord returns it to straight. And then the paracord is what you actually use to pull down to, get the finger to actually bend. So each one of the fingers has a piece of paracord sticking out the bottom, and then the bungee cord is what returns it to straight. So I had at the bottom of the hand on an arm that I attached to it, there was all the paracord was kind of joined together down there with rings for each one of your fingers. And it was just the size of it. They were about 20 pounds a piece. So when you have it kind of extended at the end of your arm, it's a little tricky to handle. So I figured out it was kind of a two-handed operation to get
That's
the thing
funny.
to work. So you kind of have your one hand to hold it, and then your other hand to operate the rings to pull the paracord to get it to function.
Did now in the video I know you did some like examples like this is Halloween candy or this is like throwing the football at Thanksgiving. Like would what did people like? I know it's pandemic and craziness of being outside, but did you have any like weird reactions from folks? You're just walking around with this like giant wooden hand, like filming stuff.
I had my neighbor across the way. They can see our yard, and she texted us. She's like, "What is going on over there?" 'Cause I had my buddy that was filming with me, and we're just like, "What can we do with these?" We're like throwing the football around and all that stuff and filming it, and it just looks like we're going crazy over here. With each one of us had, I had the left one and he had the right one, and we're just running around the yard with it.
That's funny. That's funny. What what's your friend's name that was in the video?
Cam.
Okay, that's cool.
He went to the same high school as me, so
Oh, that's crazy. But you're not from Massachusetts, right? Or are you?
I went to high school here. My dad was in the
Oh,
military, so we're kind of from all around.
oh, gotcha. So
But
how
yeah,
long were you in DC then?
3 years.
3 years. Okay, gotcha. And then you're back,
Yeah,
kind of back home. It sounds like
yeah.
that's cool.
For now.
What for now? Okay.
Yeah.
What
My wife's in the
is?
military too, so they just move
Oh,
us
gotcha.
around when they want to.
What is for folks that haven't seen it? Kind of what's your shop setup and kind of layout? Like what's kind of the area that you're working with?
Yeah, so now the new shop is a barn. It's a 2-story barn. I have the upstairs, and it's about I think 1,200 square feet or so. And then I have a garage space, which is my kind of digital fab CNC space, which is where the X-Carve Pro is, and that's like 300 square feet. Which is kind of funny. My shop in DC was a 1-car garage, kind of like an extended, stretched out 1-car garage. It was about 330 square feet. So the garage that I have is roughly the same size as the old shop, and then I have a barn in addition to that now.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
The so I saw on your stories, it looks like you're making like a really crazy sign artwork. I'm not even know what you would call it, but like the ton of ash you've been carving out.
Yeah.
Is that coming up? A project that you're working on?
Yeah, so that should be out in a week or
Oh, cool.
two. It's kind of a combination of ideas. I've seen these like cool wavy just kind of art displays. You see them in kind of like office spaces. I think they're just kind of like a cool, just wall hanging art piece. And they usually follow kind of a rough pattern where the waves, through different pieces kind of follow a general pattern. And I thought it'd be cool to make that kind of like a functional art piece. So I kind of turned it on its side and made it into shelves. And the waves, instead of following a pattern, they just kind of like randomly fit on this piece. It's about 7 feet tall. And the waves will function as shelves for kind of like little trinkets and souvenirs and things like that, depending on where they fall.
Yeah. And is that going in a stairwell? Did I see that right?
Yeah. So
Gotcha.
if you look kind of back at the bottom of the stairway, you got a big tall wall. So that's going to fill that in.
That's cool. Now, how has that, or even the hand project, like how is using the Pro compared to using kind of the standard XCarve? Like, have you noticed like differences or things like you feel like you can do differently using the bigger unit versus kind of the standard XCarve?
Yeah, it's faster, significantly faster. It's I was carving the hands were made of basswood, which is very soft, and I was carving at, I want to say 200 inches a minute, quarter-inch passes to cut through that. The ash, I had to dial it back a bit because ash is like the opposite of basswood. It screams and splinters at you when you just look at it before you even touch it. And then the work pieces too were bigger than would fit on the original XCarve. So the shelves are 40 inches wide, and I cut all those out on the XCarve Pro, and those wouldn't have fit. And then the fingers, I think, were probably too big to fit on the XCarve also, just based on how I tile them out. But yeah, it's a lot faster and bigger. I guess that's the main differences, really. Easel works all the same.
Yeah.
Having just the capacity of 4 feet wide is going to be game changing with the materials that you can use, obviously with sheet goods, and then with the tiling feature, which I haven't used yet, but I'm excited to try that out when I get a chance.
Yeah, the tiling, I've seen a couple in the chat some folks have asked about. So if you guys have like a big 4x8 sheet of plywood, there's a new feature, I think it's in beta right now, you might be able to sign up for, that you can basically move that sheet of plywood through it, so you could still handle like a full sheet, even though the footprint's only a 4x4, which I know for like my little garage shop, like I couldn't even fit. If I brought a 4x8 machine into my house, my wife might be like, all right, you need to leave because this is too big. But the ability to do that, I feel like super handy. Have you, go ahead, sir.
And even the 2x4 machine is 4 feet wide. So theoretically, you could pass a full sheet through that one too. It would be, obviously more of a pain, but it's doable. And if that's what the space that you have, there you go. Yeah.
Especially on the space side of things. I know for a lot of folks, even if you're making goods, you might be in your garage, and space could be an issue. So having a couple options is a good one. Have you thought about like potential projects differently? Like, are you like, oh, like maybe in the past, like, I don't know if that idea would work, or like as people say, like you like the Jackman size stuff. So do you feel like that Jackman size is bigger as a result? Because you're like, oh, like the pieces I can make are a little bit bigger.
I think so. Yeah. And then sometimes there's stuff that I would be like, hey, should I cut this with the XCarve or should I just cut it by hand? Is it going to be faster by hand? If I only had to make like 2 pieces or 3 pieces of something, sometimes I would just cut it by hand instead of using the XCarve because I have the other tools to do that with. If I'm making 20 of something, the chance of me using the XCarve increases quite a bit. But now, so with the XCarve Pro, whenever I have that thought in my head, it's like, oh, I'll just use that.
Yeah.
It's way easier. Like when it was like something simple with the hands, when I made a little router template for the back side of it, because I had to inset the arm in the back. So I had to cut this pocket out. And instead of cutting out the template by hand, like I probably would normally do, I just set it up on the XCarve Pro. I was able to just cut a half-inch sheet of plywood, cut a little pocket out of it, and then cut like a half depth pocket out of that for the router to ride on. So just little simple things like that, not even a full project, just a little jig is so easy and quick to do. So I just use the XCarve Pro on that.
Do you sell like products? Like, have you ever done that? Like, where you just sell like the same thing over and over again, or is most of your stuff on more like the content side of things?
Yeah, it's mostly content and one-off projects. Occasionally I'll do some batched things. but they're kind of like limited edition batched things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know Chris and Sean at Four Eyes, they, especially on the template side of things, that I think they had mentioned that it's super helpful. Like if you were, I think they put it like a chair out of like walnut or something crazy, but like a lot of the flat pack stuff, you could batch either like the templates with the routers or just like cut out the actual piece.
I have an Adirondack chair design that's pretty popular, and I sell plans for that.
Oh yeah.
I actually have a partner of mine makes templates for me, but now I have the capacity to do it, so I might bring it in house. We'll see. And been trying to think of a way to make that Adirondack chair on the CNC, and it's tough with working with like just regular hardwood lumber to do that, because you got to kind of plan the layout very specifically around knots and voids and things like that. But I've been looking around for like PVC or like HDPE, trying to get like a 4x8 sheet of that stuff, and then make some chairs out of plastic, because that, here we're like on the water in Massachusetts, so it's pretty brutal on anything that's outside. So I was thinking it'd be cool to make some out of plastic.
And like salt water too, right?
Yeah.
not just normal fresh water. Yeah.
Right.
That's something interesting I didn't know was even a business that I've heard several people mention, but like selling plans, but even like selling like the physical templates. Like you said, have you actually sold like the actual router templates, or have you just done like the plans in the past?
Yeah, so I do the plans myself through my website, and then I have a partner that makes their 1/4-inch Baltic birch templates. So you can use them to trace, or you could use them as like a router template if you want.
Yeah, that's a really cool, because when I think of manufacturing, like I just go, because I sell some like just little like signs that I carve out of either different maps or stadiums, football stadiums and stuff. But if you're able to like design a piece of furniture and then be able to sell those plans, but then sell the templates to those plans, like that's a cool business. I don't see a ton of people doing, but even if you have like a small area, having a bigger machine to cut those out could be pretty handy. And you're still not having to like put the chair together without the shipping, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and it's a cool combination of ideas with the CNC and then doing it by hand, because you got the CNC templates, and then all the other work is done by hand. But it makes it a lot easier to have those templates.
When do you find yourself using a CNC most? Like, do you go through like, if I'm gonna have to batch this out a ton, let me CNC it, versus this, maybe I should just use like a handheld router to do this? Like, do you have like a process in place, or is it more of just what makes the most sense depending on what you're working on?
Yeah, I'd say it kind of depends on what I'm working on. Mass production for sure, especially with the new machine, because it's so much faster. Like the shelves, I have, what was it, 40? There's 48 shelves on that big unit, so it was whatever's half of that, 24 cuts to do, and it was just way easier to do it, because I instead of printing out the template, it was 8 different curves that I cut, and then I just kind of randomized those, and each half of the cut is a shelf. So I took one and flipped it around, and there was 0 waste out of it, which was pretty cool. But because it was so many cuts, it was just made more sense to do it on the CNC. And each of those shelves, even though it was ash, I was able to do in 2 minutes, cool, with the cutting and clamping it down and taking it off.
Yeah. Just the speed of stuff is wild, which you're able to make. All right, so going into what's next year? 2021. Wow, this year's been crazy. Do you have any projects that you're like real excited about? It doesn't even have to be like CNC specific, but like, are there things that are coming up that like you just like, hey, watch out for this. This is gonna be something fun I'm working on.
I mean, one big thing is I want to build a boat.
Oh wow!
I'm hoping that'll happen. I don't know. Maybe I'll have it happen by the spring.
Okay.
But like I said, we're on the water, so it just makes sense. And the kind of the story behind this property is we rent it from my old shop teacher from high school, and that's the connection. And he's an old boat builder from back in the day. Like, he went to like a wood boat school, like that's his bread and butter. So I think it'd be really cool to build a boat alongside him, and him kind of get him on camera teaching a little bit too. So that's kind of, I don't know, it'll be a long-term project, but I'm hoping by the summer that might be done, so we can drop it out of the second floor of the shop and drop it in the water right behind it. It's pretty cool.
Now, when you say you're on the water, like, do you literally mean you're like, how close are you to the water right now?
Yeah, I mean, I can see it from my office
Okay,
right here, and the shop
gotcha.
is a few hundred feet away
Okay,
from the
so would
water.
you say you could drop it out of your shop into the water? Like you're not just like you literally could do that or close to it.
Pretty close. Yeah.
Close. That's funny. That's cool. The uh, you had to mention. Oh, so the boat. So are you talking like a canoe, like a Jimmy DiResta style canoe? Or are you talking like a boat, like with a motor and stuff?
Yeah, I'm envisioning a pallet wood strip canoe.
Got it.
So
Okay.
it'd be made because pallet slats are pretty thin anyway, but the canoes are made of like quarter-inch material, so it's like
Mhm.
perfect. It'd be kind of a cool mix of species and colors and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Someone, let's see. This is technically woodworking. They just said surprise twist. Paul built a tiny boat instead of a giant one.
have you
They-
have you seen they're like single person watercrafts or something? I forget what
yeah,
they're called, but they're
yeah,
like scaled down motorboats that are just big enough for you to fit in.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, that'd be so funny to build one of those. I kind of want to, so I might do that.
Yeah, maybe next year, any of the projects with us or with individuals, it could just be tiny stuff. You just do this little super tiny thing on this massive machine, just to show it just
Yeah,
being ridiculous. But
yeah. Get
um,
the big machine and just start making tiny stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So pallets. That is, I feel like, I mean, when people think of your stuff other than it being big, just the pallet piece of it. How did you get into just doing pallet stuff?
I don't know. I mean, there's a guy Sterling Davis. He's got a YouTube channel, another woodworker, and he had a pallet upcycle challenge when I started YouTube. I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. It's probably longer than that. But that was kind of my introduction to it. I was like, hey, that's a cool idea. Let's make some stuff out of pallets because you see them everywhere, and it's like I wish I could keep that from going in the trash.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how it got started. And then my motivation behind it is kind of twofold. First, obviously, recycling and being environmentally friendly is a very big thing for me. And all those pallets that I get are in the trash. Like they're going to be thrown away. They're
Yeah, yeah,
for whatever reason been used as much as they're going to be used, and then the stores don't know what to do with them. So they're happy that I take them. And the second reason is I saw a lot of stuff being made from pallets, a lot of like pallet walls and pallet coffee tables, and I felt like the full utilization of the material wasn't happening. I felt like there was more that could be done, and people weren't necessarily taking advantage of the raw materials. They were kind of taking advantage of the reclaimed look and the rustic look of it, but not really using it for what the value. They're hard wood a lot of the time,
Mhm.
so there's a lot of value there. Some of my projects, if you bought the hard wood, it would be hundreds of dollars
Right.
worth of wood, and instead you invest your time into taking a pallet apart and processing that down instead of spending it on the material. So I guess part of it is me being cheap, but also trying to push the genre
Yeah,
of pallet making, because I've heard a lot of people say too, like it's trendy, and it is.
yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people say, other people with YouTube channels be like, that trend is dead. I'm moving on to epoxy or concrete or whatever the next big thing is. But it's like, hey, I don't think we've explored that genre enough. I think there's more there
Yeah.
still, and I feel like I've proved that maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I feel like your palette projects are a lot different than when people hear like palette woodworking stuff. I mean, the stuff you do is crazy. Do you know what project you used the most like palette pieces on? Like, do you or like
Hmm.
the most complex that you've done?
I don't know. I mean the coasters that I made,
Mm,
that was a tricky one. That was, I don't remember how many pallets, but probably a dozen pallets.
mm,
And what I ended up doing is basically cutting it into like 8 inch long pieces out of the pallet slats, and then glued that into a chunk that was like 3 feet wide by like 18 inches deep and
mm.
weighed like 1 million pounds. And then I resawed that basically into slices at an angle, a compound angle, which revealed like a diamond pattern
That's
within it.
cool.
And with a mix of different species, it was kind of a very cool just visual of different colors and grain patterns and stuff. But it was a big chunk of pallet
Yeah,
wood to glue up. That's probably the most memorable one.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, making your own stock out of pallets which is already, I guess, stock wood. This is in a different form. Is funny, because Michael, is it Michael Alm with the plywood, the crazy like designs he does, and then even like Wobie with all of his like skateboard stuff. But you're just taking straight up wood and just combining it in funky ways, which is cool.
There is a pretty good parallel between the skateboard art stuff and the pallet wood. Like I didn't realize it for a while, but I kind of think of it as the same way. Like Wobie breaks it down into just raw materials and then uses that to make whatever. It's you can't really tell that it's a skateboard, and it's like, oh, that's you tell them like that the dyed veneers that comes from a skateboard. It's like, oh, okay, that's cool.
That's cool. Okay, so the other thing I did want to touch with you a little bit was just the design piece, and just with using Easel or using like Easel Pro with some of the Pro features are so like the Ash project or even the hand project. Is your what is your normal workflow? Or do you use a different vector editor and bring that in, or do you work inside of it, or a little combination of both? Like how does that kind of work? Just the Easel side of things for you in the past.
Yeah, so it depends on the complexity of the shapes. Sometimes if it's simple enough, I'll draw it in Easel, and I feel like Easel is kind of very underutilized software. It's very simple, but I feel like that's a benefit of it. There's some features in there where you can kind of combine shapes together. If you set like a cut of depth to 0, and then you have you overlay that on top of a piece, and then you combine the pieces together, that cuts out that 0-inch depth of cut. There's like tricks like that. I feel like people don't take advantage of. So the hands I drew in SketchUp and then exported that into an SVG that I cleaned up in Illustrator and then imported that into Easel. So a few steps, but I was able to draw that in Easel. I just kind of played around with it. I don't know if I showed that, but initially I drew that in Easel just to see if I could. And I was able to just by drawing a bunch of circles and lines and then combining them together. And then kind of creating, shapes on top of that with a 0-inch depth of cut, and you combine them all together, and then you get the shape that was the finger and the palm of the hand. So my initial prototypes that I showed were cut from stuff that I'd drawn right in Easel.
Yeah,
and like the wavy shelves, like I was saying before, that I did that in SketchUp. The same process.
Yeah, and you just import. You said that was a SVG that you export, or like a vector format.
Yeah, so from SketchUp, I think you can export as a PDF, but that's an SVG in a PDF file. Then you can pull that into Illustrator to kind of clean and combine the shapes together, so that Easel likes it when you import it. Otherwise, it shows up as like a bunch of different line segments or whatever.
Yeah, you gotta like combine all the stuff together on the vector side. Yeah. Even so, even before I did stuff officially with Inventables, like Easel was always my go-to, just because. Yeah, like you said, it's easy. Even if you don't have an XCarve, you can use it pretty much with any CNC, even like third party. So it's just easy to get up and running when you're making stuff. And I would encourage folks, if you didn't know, so on the Venable's website, there's a project section. If you're just interested to see the types of projects you can do inside of Easel, there's a lot of really cool examples of signs and stuff people made in the past. And then if you want to see crazy stuff, to go to Paul's channel, and then he'll make you something, a tiny boat or a massive boat, depending on what he's feeling like for next year. But well, I appreciate you jumping on and taking the time. Excited to hear how the Pro unit has been for you. Excited to see the projects you've got coming up. And so then you said the next thing people to look for are those shelves potentially next week or somewhere a couple weeks from now.
Yep. I just got to put finish on them, and those will be done.
What are you using to finish it?
So it's a sponsored project for Minwax, and I'm using some of their new kind of water-based stain. Like it's a tinted water-based wood stain. It's kind of funky, and
really,
so it's new stuff I haven't used before, and it's basically like a paint. Like you get a base. It's either a transparent base or a white base, and then you bring it up to the paint counter and tell them what color you want. Like they have a little pamphlet. There's like 200 colors.
Oh,
what color you want. So they custom mix it for you, just like a can of paint.
That's cool. Yeah, I heard there was someone on some podcast, somebody was mentioning that same thing, that you could get a simple stain. Was it Pachuto? Was it David? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said he was making some table or something out of it.
That's right. Yeah. I should remember that. That's crazy. So is there does it have any type of top coat to it? Like, are you still do you still need to put some type of protective layer, or is like that stain good to go?
I think you probably could just use stain. I'm gonna put a wax coat on top of that,
Got it.
or
Okay.
they have polyurethane and varnishes and stuff. You could top coat it with, but I figure the shelves are not going to be touched too often, so a wax coating should be plenty.
Yeah, it seems like you'd have to like jump off your stairs to get to the
Yeah,
shelves from the way you have it set up. So,
yeah, we're
well,
gonna
cool, man.
need stairs to be able to put stuff up on the shelves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time as always. You're making super great stuff. For folks that are watching after, there'll be links to all the projects we've talked about in this video. If you guys are watching live, just go to Paul's channel and you'll find all this stuff. But and thank you so much for jumping on and chatting. As always, it's a blast to chat with you. See what you're working on.
Yeah, great to talk to you again.
Yeah.